Alright guys, so now that you've heard that, let's get started on making this a little bit more bouncy. Usually when I do my tutorials, we start from scratch and we build a full tune, but I'm going to throw this project at you guys, use it however you want, as long as you put my name in the title. So it sounds pretty decent, but we want to give it some more energy. So usually the crashes come off the drop the same on each, but what we're going to do is take out these long crashes for starters. And a sound that I like to throw in is pretty simple. It is a sound which is white noise, but a really short snippet. So it sounds like this. That's it. Just taken from one of my own downlifters. Alright, so that is just slapped on the drop there. And then also we have got a second crash, which is the same as the one before. But the only thing I've done is taken that crash, I've made it a unique. So in the top corner here, you click make unique. And once we bring this up, you can see that I have completely changed the sound. So for example, on the out, we whack it all the way out. And then the length, we just draw it down until it sort of reaches just one beat. So this is one beat length here now. And already we can hear some difference on the drop. So it's already got a bit more pump because of the silence and the pause right in here. If you're making this type of music, using little pauses like that can create some serious energy. Now the next part, which is the most important part, is we're going to open up our pattern here. And these are individual sounds. So for example, our lead sounds like this. So it's a fully distorted, really muddy, aggressive lead. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to go into each of these patterns except for the little knock here. And we're going to just go Control A to select all. And we're just going to bring back the note end ever so slightly. So if you hold down the Alt key, you can then drag freely. And we just want to create a little bit of space. So maybe, shave off a third of this cell size here. And then it sounds like this. So the difference is now and then after. You can already feel that it's got more bounce, and we can do the same with the rest of the sounds as well. So we've got a sub. We do exactly the same thing. Control A, drag it back. You can already feel like the track is pumping more. We do the same with the next sound. Doesn't have to be perfect in here, but you can see the trail from Ghosts if you want to keep it exactly the same. This is the mid bass, so that's on 22. And we're going to do the same for the rest of the sounds as well. Got a nice brass here. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And then we have another one. Going to do exactly the same thing again. Bring that back. You can see how just a slight adjustment makes a huge difference. And then another one, we've got a number 9. We're going to do the same thing. Now we've got some pump going. So that's step number 1. And I've got 2 layers here, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same to the second adjusted pattern, which has just got a different end note. It's going to be 2 seconds to do that. Okay, so that's done now. And the next step is going into our piano roll here and adding yourself in a white noise layer, which follows all of the same note hits as your melody, so that it's a filler layer. It gives you some more power to your lead. So that sounds on its own like this. But we're going to do literally the exact same thing that we did with the patterns. We're just going to select all of these, zoom in, and we're just going to pull back the end like so. So sort of see where these lines are. That should be the end trail of that. And now it sounds like this. Cool. So now if we put that all together, we're already giving ourselves some serious bounce to the track. And all we've done is literally just pull back the end of these notes as much as we can. And do note that I am not running any reverb on any of these notes, so that when the note stops, we actually have almost full silence from all of the parts of that pattern. And we want that, that's what we want, because that little subtle pause in between each note really fills out that bouncy type of sound. The only thing that I do want to do now is this gap. The pause is nice, but it's too empty. So there's a little trick that you can do, and that's with an automation down here. So I'm just going to go ahead and open these up for you, and I'll play it back and then I'll explain what's actually going on with that one there. So let's go ahead and play that. This is very simple. Running off this in the lead here. So you can see here in our reverb that all I've done is gone to the wet, right click, create automation clip. So we can see that this clip down here is controlling the reverb. What I've done is just zoomed in to that 1 beat bar, made a nice sweep, and a full cut when the lead hits again. So you can see the automation happen. So there's a bit of lag on the visual display, but you can see it goes all the way up to 100% and then drops straight back down to 0. And that's a nice little effect to add to mid basses. And make sure that with your reverb you do a low cut so that you're not reverberating the lower frequencies, because that will make it very muddy. But you can do that with mid basses to fill pauses that are too empty. But try using pauses with your track as well. One small thing is on the second half of the drop, I have got I made a transcate on a sample with lots of reverb, and now it sounds a little bit like this. Once we get to it here. So that's pretty basic, but what I've done is just copied it over to the other side, and then I've literally just chopped up the sound in regards to what would fit. So you can see here, I just really wanted to take out and make it the most basic little piece to fill out the sound. It's really subtle, low volume, but it does make a bit of difference to adding some difference to that drop. So we bring it in. So you can hear the pauses in there. So all together. That's pretty straightforward on how to make it more bouncy, and that is one of the easiest ways to bring your track into more of a bouncy feel. Now, if you are running reverbs and delays on your leads, because that always happens, almost always, I kept this dry because the distorted lead sounded good like this, but usually it won't. What you'll want to do is, if I bring up my lead sound here, which is on number 14, if I do have a reverb running on it, that's a normal reverb. We don't get as much bounce as we did before. So we're missing out on that bounce. Now, we can fix that by just highlighting a selection of the sound that we want. So I'm going to just do for the whole pattern. And then I'm just going to go to the wet on here, right click it, and go create automation clip. So that'll make an automation clip for the selected amount here. Now, there's two ways to do this. We can either manually draw in each automation to cut the reverb out, or we can just make a singular one, really nice and short, and we can post it forward and back as we go. So what I will do is I'll right click to create a point here, drag it down to 0, max out the tension, and then once we have it selected, then we can move it we can hit the Alt key, and now we have free dragging here. And we're going to do exactly the same with the cut here. So once you've dragged it to the end of the first note, you can go ahead and cut the audio clip, and we're going to push it to do the same for the second one. And then we can just drag this tail end until it matches. So basically, as soon as it cuts to 0, it's going to go back to its original reverb volume right when the note hits, and then it's going to cut right out again. And basically, you just repeat this process for the rest of the notes. So these are pretty straightforward. That's pretty straightforward. We can do the same. In order to do this quick copying, you can press the Shift key and then click and drag, and it'll just drag it over. Speeds up having to post so many of these over and over again. I do know that once I've finished this one, this is the only difference. You can see that these are longer notes here. So all we do is we just, we can either drag it here, we can make a cut of the first part because it's an automation clip, and it'll only do what it's told when it runs across it. That way you don't have to push anything and mess up the length of your other automation clips. And then it sounds like this. So if we take that automation out, you can hear the reverb just going crazy. We have it on. Now we have that bounce is still there, but we also have the added reverb to make our lead sound a bit more full. So that is another way to do it. You can also use volume instead of a reverb cut. If you have delays running, then it will just do it easily for you. And if you like, you can just link a volume to the same thing, or start with the volume and do exactly what we just did here, but with a volume automation, and you'll achieve the same result. This is just an Atmos layer running here, so you don't have to cut that one up because it sits extremely low level in the background. But with that, you can basically finish up on your tune, making it more bouncy. And it was such a subtle thing to do, but you can tell that it makes an extremely large difference. And that's what we want to do, because if we try to do too much, sometimes it can be messy. So I'm just going to take these out because we have very short little pieces here, as you can see. And basically you just copy over the automation clip to end at the end of any note that you have for your lead so that it matches up. And then I also want to do the same for the second half of the song, which we can do quite easily by just doing the shift click drag, and we're just going to drop it in there. The only other part that I've got is a little bit of variance. So on the second drop, you can sort of hear, we can turn this back on, these little clips that are hiding in the bottom here. And this is what it would sound like without them running. And then if I put them in, they just add a little bit more for our lead. Just a little whoop. So basically what I did is I just took part of the lead and rendered a small section of it. I created a pitch which just went from low to high on a curve, and then also a little bit of a filter so that it has a nice draw coming up, and that just creates that whoop sound effect to bring the lead in with a bit more bounce again. Now, one thing that I think will be most important, especially for tracks like this, is your sidechain selection. Now, I used to be a bit of a hater on Kickstart until I saw professional producers using it, and I figured, well, if it's good enough for them, then it will be good enough for me. And I do like how it sounds with a little bit of different programming. It can sound fantastic. So for example, usually people would run a Kickstart on each individual channel to create the sidechain, but for tracks like this, if there are some effects on it, there will be slight delay, and if the bounce is supposed to happen slight delay will throw off that a little bit. So instead of putting a kickstart on each individual channel and having problems with the sidechain being all perfect, the best thing to do would be to do this. So if we load up our pattern, which is this one here, and we're running on them, which is these sounds. What you can see is on each of these channels, I have created an empty, for starters, just go to an empty channel, name it sidechain, and add your kickstart, and the one I've chosen is the tighter preset there. And you link each of them together. So for this one, it will look like this. As a first example, it'll be linked to your master channel. You don't want to do that. You first want to link to the sidechain, and then you want to unlink it from the master channel. And the reason that we're doing this for each of these sounds, oh, that's not even linked in properly. This is just a little click, so I don't need that one linked in. So for each of those sounds, they're all being routed through this send. Now we do that on purpose so that the sidechain completely cuts at the exact same time on all of the sounds at once, and we can then control the individual volume of that track also. And that way we've got an added volume that we can use for automating the entire basically drop sound. But this has been a big difference to really create bounce for your tracks, because the sidechain is just perfect on timing, and then with all the little cuts of each of the sounds, you get that total bounce feel. So if we put everything together that we did change, the drop would then sound like this. And that basically concludes the way on how to make a track more bouncy. This isn't my usual genre, but I know a few people wanted to know how to make a track more bouncy, so I decided to make this tutorial for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you have learned something. I hope you can try and use, well, this FLP, for example. I will export to stems, so there will be no problems with any of the plugins. Go ahead, remix this, use it for your own projects, but if you do post it, please do put my name in the title, just Feet Yano, or your name and Yano, and then we will be making some good music. And I'd love to hear what you guys make, so once you do make it, send it to me so I can listen to it and see what you guys have done. Peace.
Drop, 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 drop. I don't wanna make it stop. I just wanna